Welcome, everyone, to episode 53 of the Brandon Adams podcast. I'm here with David Benefield. Dave has had quite an interesting journey for a poker legend. He crushed the biggest games in online poker from ages 18 to 25. He then left the poker world to pursue studies at St. John's University and Columbia. While he was at Columbia, he took a bit of a sabbatical to go to Macau and play in the highest stakes games in the world for a year and a half. He also, during this sabbatical, made the 2013 main event final table at the World Series of Poker. He now resides in Texas, where he oversees a staff of 8 people in an actively managed crypto trading fund. Dave, thanks so much for coming on. How's it going today?
Pretty good. How you doing, Brandon?
Pretty good. All right. So take us back to age 18. Or maybe before age 18, because I understand that you started poker after watching Rounders. How old were you when Rounders came out?
Oh, I'm not sure how old I was when it came out, but I first saw it when I was 16. And that sort of jump-started my interest in poker, along with a few classmates. We started playing in high school, just kind of, instead of going to the party on Friday night, we get together and have a poker game or whatever at somebody's house. Had a group of maybe like 6 to 10 guys pretty consistently, and we'd play little tournaments and like $10 buy-in cash games and things like that. Got my start doing that. Then found some like local cash games or whatever in and around Dallas-Fort Worth area. Played a couple like small buy-in games there until I got to age 18 and started playing online.
So how long did it take for the ultra competitive streak to kick in?
I think probably the first day I played. One of the kids in the game, Grant, he sort of seemed like he was doing things a little bit better than everybody else, a little bit more methodical. He seemed to be showing up with the good hands consistently. And like the first 2 sessions we played, he built like a huge stack, and I just like torched off all my money. I had no idea what was going on. Kind of just reached out to him, was like, hey, like, is there some strategy? Like, how are you thinking about this? Like, how's this thing work? And I think he'd read like Theory of Poker or something at that point. So he had like an enormous advantage over anybody that hadn't like thought about poker in, a serious way at all before. So I ended up just picking up a bunch of books. I think like found like the 2+2 forums or whatever. This was probably 2003, maybe. So I read this stuff that existed back then. That was like Hold'em Poker for advanced players, and like Sklansky and Mammoth stuff. There really wasn't a ton of what I thought was great literature at the time, but most of my I'd say early learnings came through just a network of friends and just like other people that were doing the same stuff. We just chatted about poker all the time and kind of figured it out together, independent of the books or whatever.
What were your favorite 2+2 forums back in the day?
I was in the early days, I was big on the STTF forum, the single table tournaments. I played mostly sit and goes when I first started. I was a little bit hesitant to switch to the cash games, mostly I think because like sit and goes were pretty easy and straightforward, and I had a nice system that worked. And so I was pretty active in the STTF forum for the first couple of years, and then like probably everything a little bit after that. But that was certainly my home for the first few years.
So you've told the story elsewhere that a formative early experience for you was going to the PokerStars Caribbean adventure in the Bahamas and meeting all of the people that you had previously only known on 2+2. Could you take us back to that time?
Man, I mean, we're going back half a lifetime now. Yeah, my early crew, I guess, trying to think back, guys like, it was like the Ship at Halabala group, like Andrew Roble and Peter Jetton and Tom Dorn was in the mix, and Alan Sass and some of those guys. Yeah, first time I went to PCA, I think it must have been like 2005. And I think I'd saved up maybe like, I don't know, built my bankroll up to like 30 or 40,000. And then I just like was like, oh, let's spend half of this on this like PCA thing. That seems like a good investment. So I just like direct bought into the PCA that first year I went down and busted out in the first day in like maybe 4 or 5 hours or something. Just didn't play particularly well. And I can't remember what happened, but I think I probably just torched it off. And so that was like my first real big events that I played in person. But like, it was also the place where I met, a lot of those guys mentioned. I think there was probably, I can't remember who was down there at the time, but that was like the first time. That was like the first big poker trip I went on, where I got to put some names to faces a little bit. There was also an event that Irie guy ran, famous in the STTF forums or whatever. He ran like a big heads up tournament where must have been like 20 or 30 of the guys that were all regular posters on the forum came together and played like I don't remember what it was, $500, $1,000 buy-in heads up tournament, and met a bunch of the guys through that as well.
The crazy thing is, I remember that tournament very well also.
Okay.
And when you get a little older, you'll realize it's a bit harder to jog the memory. But I remember meeting, for instance, Tom with his chain back then, 18 years old at that tournament. I remember distinctly where I was when I met him and sort of what we chatted about. And I remember meeting other characters of the time, like back then, Ozzy 87 was on the big here. Remember that? He was
No, he was a crusher.
Playing the games. And I remember that tournament that you're talking about, they played it Battleship style, right?
Yes. We played with physical cards though. It didn't do laptops or anything. It was just heads up in person, rented out like a little conference room or something.
Yeah. And back then everyone would sort of sit in the lobby and play online poker. Like you could go to the lobby at any point in time. There'd be 50 people down there playing poker.
Yeah. Well, so the heads up tournament that Irie game ran, that was in Vegas, but at PCA, yeah, like there was always stuff going on in the lobbies or whatever, like Coral Towers or whatever. People are just kind of grouped up, grinding online or whatever, and they did do that Battleship style heads up tournament at PCA. I think.
Yeah, I remember that. So you met Durr for the first time in that PCA tournament, and you guys ultimately rented a house together, which was sort of like I don't know, poker boot camp or whatever. You guys had the setup and were playing quite a lot of poker in those times. How did that come about? How much later was that than the 2005 PCA?
I think we bought that house in 2006. So I'm pretty sure like we actually bought that place, but neither of us had documentable income, hadn't paid taxes. And so we were like the no document loan people that were like part of the subprime disaster. I assume it was like them giving people like me, $500,000 loans to buy a house or whatever, part of what caused the issues that we had. But yeah, we got that house in Fort Worth, Texas, and that was just sort of the base of operations in the early days. Yeah, just grinding, had friends come into town, hang out, whatever. Still traveled a bunch. I think probably like Tom never really even spent that much time there. I think he probably spent maybe like 3 or 4 months there the first year, and then like 2 months there the second year, and then it quickly kind of trickled off. And I didn't really spend a ton of time there after those early days either, but it was pretty close to where my parents lived. So it was like a really convenient place whenever I came back in town to kind of hang out and be close to the family.
Speaking of Tom not spending much time there, I have a funny Tom story that you could relate to. I remember in March 2007, Tom, for some reason, he asked me like how much money I spent in the course of a year. And I told him how much I had spent in 2006, which was a large amount. And he was sort of shocked by it. And he told me what he had spent. And back then, believe it or not, it was actually kind of a small amount that he had spent in 2006. And so then this conversation was in March of 2007. Well, by the end of March 2007, he had 4 places that included a very large Vegas residence, a 4-bedroom residence in San Diego, a 4-bedroom place in Boston, and maybe your place in Texas, one other place for sure. And at least 2 of those places he spent less than 7 days in over the course of the year. So we didn't have to go very far to calculate that he had whatever he was shocked by in my expenses in 2006, he had like 4 or 5x that in 2007.
Yep.
And then he was just sort of off to the races
All very on brand.
from there. Now, in terms of your teachers, if you will, you mentioned some of this group, Peter Jetton, Alan Sass, Andrew Roble, maybe a bit later, Hack Dang and Dai Dang, Galfond.
Yeah, Zian Hack, Phil Galfond, those guys, yeah.
So maybe Tom is perceived as kind of the teacher there. How did it go down? Was it everyone contributing? Who was the formative intellectual influence? And Hack and Z, you guys were playing a lot of poker together. When did you meet them?
Yeah, I met Z and Hack a few years later. I met Phil Galfond at that SCTF heads up event, I'm pretty sure, for the first time. But I sort of look at those guys as my like secondary poker group or something. In the early days, let's see, with Tom, like Tom and I are very, very, very different. And like we sort of adopted very different styles for poker when we first started playing. But I learned a ton watching him. Like he used to, I mean, even in like 05, 06, he would be battling like pretty big stakes, like heads up no limit. And then he started playing PLO, and he was just always kind of in these games against, you know, guys that I thought were really good. So it was really cool to kind of just like sit behind him and just like watch, and then like talk to him about stuff and like figure out how he's thinking about the game or whatever. And I definitely like learned how to be an aggressive maniac to some decent effect in the early days through Tom. And then like my very early like PLO exposure was through him as well. And so yeah, like trying to think about like who I learned the most from. I don't know. I did really always love just like watching my friends play poker. Like I kind of felt like the style that I had adopted was a bit of an amalgamation of a lot of my friends and their styles and the things that they did. And I'd bring in little pieces that I felt kind of like fit my style or made sense to me to add or whatever. And so I'm not sure I'd say there's any like one in particular, but just like that group in general, like they were all very, very good, like among the best at one point. And I feel like just kind of being exposed to those guys and being around them and getting to watch them play and getting to talk about how they think about hands and general strategies and life and whatever, was all, you know, incredibly important to my own development and getting better and whatever. But I'm struggling to identify anyone in particular that I felt had like a specifically profound effect or something. But I definitely look at myself as sort of a combination of like all of those styles in a way.
You've mentioned elsewhere that in your formative poker years, you were spending 100 hours a week playing poker, thinking about poker, talking about poker. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it was an all-consuming thing for me. Like I didn't really do anything else when I was playing poker full time. Yeah, like I basically, like I would wake up, I would sit down on my computer and I would like basically pull up tables. Now that was pretty consistent for a number of years. And anytime like I wasn't sitting at a poker table, I was usually with poker friends, talking strat, talking about whatever. And so probably for the first like 5 years I played, those hours were pretty consistent. Like I'd go out or whatever, but it was like usually with or around poker people. And that's all we talked about. I mean, it was really an obsession for a while, for sure. I think it kind of had to be. Like just back then, like it was the most interesting thing I could do. It was also the most lucrative thing I could do. And so it wasn't even a choice. It was just like, this is clearly the right thing to be doing with my time.
So take us back to your blog. It was a very popular blog at the time.
You're really making me go back in time for this.
I know. This is it. I mean, we're done. We're done after this. I promise. But I want to hear about the blog because, look, people find it hard to imagine now that blogs were ever popular because blogs are not currently popular. And your blog was very popular. I mean, we didn't know about engagement stats and things like that back then, but I think 2006, 2007, that was the height of engagement for poker. I think now, even if Phil Ivey starts a blog tomorrow and starts revealing every secret about his life, like, it's not going to have tremendous engagement relative to what maybe your blog had in 2006. It was just much more of a blog oriented internet. And your blog was kind of a funny thing because it was all over the map. Sometimes you would do deep soul searching. Many times it would be sort of a journal of quite structured behavior in terms of wake up, work out, eat healthy, play a lot of poker. Take us back to those blog days. And can anyone find your blog right now if they wanted to?
Can anyone find it? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's still up on like the Card Runner site. Maybe somebody hosted it somewhere else. I'm really not sure. I haven't really thought about it in a long time. Okay, so taking back to the blog years. Yeah, so that was like, I mean, that was a very personal blog. Like it was sort of, it was like my public process of self-discovery or something, I guess. And like, you know, I was just an idiot kid, right? Like I'm like a 20-year-old. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm just trying to figure it out. And so like, I was very public in sharing that process. I think like I was pretty happy to kind of just like talk about the stuff that I was going through or the stuff that I was struggling with or the stuff that I was interested in. And the blog format was really nice because like I'd get a lot of feedback on stuff. Like if I was struggling with something, like somebody would usually have some thoughts. They've dealt with something similar and like, oh cool, I can learn from that. Or just like kind of sharing like my poker journey or whatever. Like a lot of people would ask about it. So I'd, you know, post results, talk about like different like heads up battles I was playing. And it was, thinking back, like I feel like it was a really useful tool for me to just kind of like develop myself and how I think about stuff and how I think about the learning process and stuff like that. I haven't actually like reflected on it in any meaningful way. But like looking back, like I do think it was like a really cool thing and I'm really glad I did it. And I'm actually curious to go back and read some of it now, just to like get an idea of how I was thinking about stuff or whatever back then. What's changed now.
So in that 06, 09 period, do you have a distinct memory of your biggest upswing and biggest downswing?
I'm trying to remember if it was like before 2011 or after, because I was still playing, like I went back to school, but I was still playing quite a bit. I remember when Black Friday happened, like me and Gus were battling a bunch of like 500 1K cap. And I was like in the midst of like my worst downswing ever. And then Black Friday happened and I was like, oh fuck, I'm never going to get my money back now. And that was a thing. But yeah, I mean, let's see. I mean, biggest downswing was probably around 1.5 million or something at that time. And that was like probably a combination of playing horrifically and playing against people that I shouldn't have been playing. And then just like general variance or whatever. Biggest upswing, I mean, I don't know. Whatever allowed me to lose 1.5 million. So.
Okay, so in 2009, you enrolled in St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
I did. It's the only place I got into.
And that was a deliberate decision, presumably something you had been thinking about for some time. Could you take us back to that decision?
Yeah. So while I was obsessed with poker, I think I didn't like love it. I think I sort of recognized at some point, maybe by like 2007, that it wasn't going to be what I did for the rest of my life. And so I think like in 08, 09, I was actually like pretty depressed. And I think I was like objectively, I was in a very good situation. I had a pretty good bankroll. I was like among the better players in poker at the games that I played. But every day kind of like felt like it was the same to me a little bit. Like I'd wake up, I'd play a bunch of poker and then I'd go to sleep and I kind of lived in a little bit of a bubble. Didn't know really what I wanted to do at all, but I kind of knew that I wanted to do something. I didn't want to have any limiting factors once I figured it out. So figured a decent start would be to go back to school. And then thinking about like the places I wanted to go, I wasn't necessarily interested in anything technical at the time. So I wanted to build like a foundation of philosophy, essentially. And so that was like my primary interest at the time. I applied to, Pomona College in just outside of LA, Claremont, Reed College in Portland, and then St. John's College. All a little bit different, but also kind of directionally similar. Only got into St. John's College, and really glad that I did it. It's a super interesting program. Called the Great Books. The focus is a classical education. You read the classics of Western civilization. So you start with like the Iliad, the Odyssey. You're learning how to translate ancient Greek from day one. So you're reading Plato and Aristotle and using those translations that you develop yourself and kind of comparing those to translations from people that do that for a living or whatever. Like learning the Greek stuff was really interesting for me. Like I probably spent like 4 hours a day just like translating ancient Greek in a dungeon for like half a year. And that was like, coming from the poker life where we kind of just do whatever we want. And like, it sort of feels like everything's a game. That was like my first, real exposure to like the rote work that I'd had in like half a decade or something. But just like the program in general, I feel like was really good for me. All the classes were extremely small. You have like 12 to 20 kids, 1 to 2, they call them tutors, but those would be the professors. Their idea was essentially to just like guide the discussion, kind of like keep it from going too off the rails. And then everybody sort of had this like shared vocabulary. We all read the same books. We all took the same classes. There wasn't any majors that you got to choose. You didn't get to pick your classes. And so it's like, by year 2, year 3, everyone's read the same stuff. And so it's like all of the references you're talking about, like everyone shares that. And I thought that was like a really cool kind of, really cool mechanism just for going about a college. I spent 2 years there. I eventually got to the point where I like didn't really want to do classics anymore. But at the time, I think it was like a really good place for me to be.
So you moved on to Columbia. But before we go into the Columbia years, I want to ask you, how did you rein in your attention span after years of playing in the highest stimulation environment possible, super high stake poker, multi-table, 100 hours a week, go from that to sitting in the library doing Greek translations? A lot of people would be interested in this because I frequently talk with people that are trying to make a transition into, say, a hard academic program from a high stimulation environment. They find it very difficult. So you remember how you did it?
I just did it. I mean, I think it was a little bit a combo of like, well, probably the most important thing is that like I chose to be there. And like if I choose to do something, I feel like it's usually like pretty easy to keep doing it. And so it didn't feel like anybody was forcing me to be there. It's like, oh no, I wanted to do this. This is part of me being here. So I'm just going to get it done. I actually took my first real poker break my first semester there, where I didn't play for 3 months. And for me, that was like a crazy thing. Like, I don't think I'd taken longer than a week break in the 5 years before that. And this was also the time when like Isildur was coming onto the scene. And so he was, playing these epic heads up battles. And so like the high stakes games were booming and there was just like, I don't know, ton of action or whatever. I think this was 2010. So I think it was 2010 that I started going to St. John's College. Anyway, but yeah, so I took that time off. And so I think that sort of allowed me to, I don't know, dial into the life of being a student again and turn off the like perpetual high stakes volatility stimulation or whatever. And I think after a couple of weeks, it's like, it wasn't a big deal.
How was
I wish I had some like really good advice for like people trying to transition or whatever. I think you just have, if it's something you really want to do, you'll find a way to do it. If you don't really want to do it, you'll find a reason not to.
How was the move to Columbia?
That was interesting. So I did 2 years at St. John's College. After the first year, I started looking into like uh, transferring. I didn't really know like where I could get in, so I kind of just took a list of like the top 30 schools and applied to all of them. Got into more than I thought I would, which is cool. Columbia was the uh, top of my list that I got into. So was pretty happy to go to New York. Pretty happy to live there for a little bit. But I made a mistake my first semester. Like I had a pretty good foundation in Greek. I thought about continuing my classical studies a little bit, at least for like to fulfill a language requirement at Columbia. But I was kind of over it. I wasn't that interested in it anymore. Didn't think I was going to use it too much, other than like, you know, the foundation that I built, like that seemed sufficient. So I started taking Chinese, and that was kind of a nightmare for me. Like I really did spend 4 or 5 hours a day just like trying to figure out how this language worked. I think like I showed up day one to like the elementary Chinese class and got our textbooks and teachers writing on the board and everything, and it's all just Chinese characters. I'm just like, am I supposed to like know how to read this? Like looking around, like the other students in the class, they all seem like they're good to go. And I'm just like, oh, hello, I don't think I'm in the right place here. I was in the right place. That was the elementary Chinese class. I just had a long way to go. But other than that, I took my degree, I transferred allegedly to do economics. I took a bunch of like econ and math the first semester along with the Chinese. And it was really hard. Honestly, like I spent like way too much time studying. I didn't have much of a life that first semester. So I was kind of like looking at, thinking more about like what I wanted to do, what I needed as far as like credits to graduate or whatever. And like pretty much all of my credits at that point were humanities, classics type stuff. And so like a track that I was a little bit better for was East Asian studies. And so I just decided to major in East Asian studies because it was like the quickest path to graduation, essentially.
Somewhere along the way at Columbia, you chanced upon a main event final table and you took a semester or two off. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So after my first year at Columbia, I did a study abroad program in Beijing. That was a 2.5-month program at Minzu Dashue, which is like a ethnic minority university, like 40 minutes outside of the city center. Anyway, that was a cool program. Tom was in Macau at the time. I'd never been at this point. This was 2012, I think, like summer 2012. He was just like, hey, I'm in Macau. You should come down before you head back. And I'm just like, fuck, man, I've been gone for like 2.5 months. I don't really want to like go on some other trip to play poker right now. I'd like to get back and see some friends before school starts. Anyway, he talks me into going to Macau. I fly down there. Ends up being like the most amazing games I've ever seen. It's like, you know, you're playing 10 times higher stakes against players that are like 5 times worse. So theoretically, you can make 50 times as much money. That seemed like a pretty good place to spend some time. So I ended up taking the next 1.5 years off. But my plan was to just like take a semester off, spend some time in Macau, play some poker, take a little break. Just got done grinding for a year, was pretty over it. Knowing that I only had about like 1.5 years left to finish off school. I expected to go back a semester later. Anyway, extended that time off one more semester. First semester went pretty well, wanted to spend some more time out there. And then that following summer in Vegas, I final tabled the main event. Decided to take another semester off because I thought it'd be useful to just like play a bunch more live tournaments and play some high rollers and try to get some final table experience and whatever leading up to the main event. So had a 1.5 year long break in between to get back on the poker ground.
Where were you living in Macau?
I was in One Central. It's like just outside of the Wynn, there's like a big shopping mall between Wynn and the Mandarin Oriental. There's like 7 big towers, just kind of luxury condos, whatever. And it was very convenient because you could go down at 6 a.m. to the poker room, put your name on the list. They'd send you a text. You had 20 minutes to get to your seat. You have more than enough time if you're living in one central to just throw some pants on and come downstairs and be at the poker table. Super convenient.
So would you play most of your poker at the Wynn or in the junket rooms, or?
The regular game I played in was at the Wynn. The junket stuff was usually at Star World, and that was like the real big game stuff. I didn't actually play in the super big game that much initially. And then like really like I was objectively just like massively underrolled for how big the stakes were. And yeah, I mean, some of the stuff, some of the games are absolutely insane, but yeah. Most of the stuff I did was at Wynn. I played in the big game at Star World like once a month kind of thing when I was over there.
What Americans were you hanging with regularly in Macau?
Like probably not like a ton of Americans really. Most of my crew was like European or Chinese or whatever. I was let's see, sort of like after the first few years, I spent a lot of time with a couple of the French guys. We shared an apartment. Rui Cal, Romain Arnaud, Cyril. They were a fun group of degenerate, really solid poker players. And then like guys like Andy Mosley, he was probably like my closest friend out there. And then a lot of the British guys, like John and JP Kelly used to play a bunch out there, and some other guys. Yeah.
So the main event, what was your entering chip position? I know the final result was 8th.
I was last in chips going into the final table.
Okay.
Like I think I had like 17 big ones or something like that. Yeah, I was last in chips.
Fun at the time, right, to have the November 9 format and get to.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was cool. Like it was, I think everybody's most kids coming up have like a dream to final table the main event. Probably the dream is to win it. But certainly a final tabling the main event is one of those sort of experiences that I think most poker players are pretty happy to check off the bucket list if they're lucky enough to get to do it. So certainly a cool thing. Didn't really expect it. So yeah, anyway, it was cool.
Football fans, join the next generation of fantasy football with Rainmakers Football, the first ever NFT fantasy game from DraftKings. It's the only NFT fantasy game licensed by the NFL Players Association. You can play all season for millions in prizes by building the ultimate NFT franchise. Playing Rainmakers is simple. Buy, sell, bid, and win player card NFTs of the biggest names in the game through regular drops and auctions on DraftKings Marketplace. Build your NFT franchise and enter free Rainmakers football contests all season long. You'll be competing for almost $30 million in prizes. Download the DraftKings Fantasy app and sign up with the promo code ADAMS. Click the Rainmakers tile and opt in to get your first card free. You will then be playing for millions in prizes all football season while building the ultimate NFT franchise. That's promo code ADAMS. Build, play, and win only at DraftKings. So then you are back at Columbia and you finish up in 2015.
Yep.
And you had this practical experience. How did that shape your studies?
How did my poker shape my studies?
Well, you had been in China for 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, right. So like that, it would make sense that I would have gotten a little bit better at the language and culture stuff. Let's see. I would say it didn't really do much in terms of like reshaping my studies. I was already pretty locked in to like my major and stuff, just with like where I was at with credits or whatever. But my Chinese did get a little bit better. Obviously, like you have a lot of exposure to it in Macau. That being said, like most of the speakers there are kind of defaulting to Cantonese, and I was studying Mandarin, so it wasn't particularly helpful. Macau's like right outside of Hong Kong, and so you get the Hong Kong is sort of native Cantonese speaking more generally, and then like Beijing further up north is like more Mandarin speaking. So that's what I did. But yeah, I mean, it was very good, I think, experience to have going back to school. And I did write my thesis about money laundering in Macau. So that was pretty relevant, I guess.
That's a tough one to take on. And that was around the time the Wall Street Journal reporter was writing about the same topic. And I think it caused some changes in rules in the Western casinos and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I was doing anything that would have been like trouble causing. This undergraduate thesis isn't like something anybody's really going to read, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, it was sort of just like, I wasn't really like going after people involved. I was just kind of like looking at numbers and how they shifted and what the major games are and like where revenue comes from and implications of a few different things related to that.
So in retrospect, you would say that those boom years of Macau poker, they were Chinese capital flight facilitated through Macau, and then that sort of tightened off recently.
I don't know if I would say that, but it certainly seems like at one point in the past, it was a lot easier to get money into Macau from the mainland than it is currently.
And yeah. Macau is probably the action there is probably 1/10 of what it used to be, right?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not even sure. Like I haven't, we're talking a lot about poker. I haven't actually played poker in 3.5 years. Almost a little over 3 years, I guess. But yeah, I'm not sure what the numbers are like over there. And I'd imagine they're hurting. Like I think COVID kind of wrecked Macau a little bit. And then before that, they were doing some anti-corruption crackdown stuff that limited liquidity, I guess you could say.
So you say you haven't played in 3 years, but according to your Hinden mob, you had quite a run at the Triton London 2019. Yep. Seemed like you did very, very well there.
That was the last time I played poker.
And then I had never heard this, but someone was mentioning recently that a lot of players had trouble getting paid for one reason or another in that tournament. I don't know if that, or there was something about some people were unhappy with the payments process for that tournament.
It might have taken a minute. I honestly don't even remember. I don't recall it being a huge deal personally.
So you did a couple of Triton events that year. You did Jeju, I guess, and London.
I think I played 3 Triton events. I did Jeju, I did Montenegro, and I did London. Possible I did one more. I can't remember. Yeah, I think just those 3.
So in the research for this pod, I listened to your podcast with Lee Davey that you did in 2019 in Jeju. Okay. It was a very good podcast.
Thank you.
It was also, by the way, a very tough podcast. He asked questions that were way tougher than you'll ever get from me. I don't know if he prepped you on those, but he asked questions like, what were 3 defining moments in your life? It's hard questions to answer on the spot. And I also, as part of my preparation, went through 2.5 years of your Twitter. And I have to call you to task on one thing.
Uh-oh.
For someone who blogged so openly back in the day, 15 years ago, you stay pretty tight-lipped on your Twitter. There's a lot of retweeting going on. When are we going to get some openness from David Benefield?
I don't know. I just don't see much benefit in being open these days, I guess.
Well, in the interview from Jeju, you mentioned that you have a problem with the political divisiveness and the polarity and the fact that people can be closed-minded to differing opinions. Is that sort of what you're referring to? That's the problem you have with Twitter?
No, I think it's just not a great format to disagree. And I find that on Twitter, I want to disagree a lot. And the way to do that probably isn't in like 280 character clumps. There's just not enough space for nuance. that being said, like I do quite like Twitter and spend quite a bit of time on it. Although I use it more as like more for news, basically, just like have a pretty curated feed and try to follow specific people, or at least like I use lists and stuff pretty consistently to filter things. Is I don't know, man. It's like I just I really don't have a reason to be public about much. I think like in earlier days, there was a benefit to doing that, right? Like having your name out there, having people know who you were in the poker world was like really good for sponsorships. It was really good for just like for a lot of things. But these days, like I'm not selling anything. I'm not trying to get noticed. Mostly I'm just trying to be left alone. So kind of like engaging and getting fired up on Twitter just doesn't necessarily align with like my lifestyle right in this moment. Not that I don't have thoughts. I just I don't see much need to kind of like get out there and share them with everyone.
Well, I did find one actual tweet that was not a retweet from January 2022. It says, the good news is that I'm reading books again. The bad news is that they're mostly about various ways everything has gone to shit historically, so I can better understand how everything will go to shit from here. So
Yeah.
take us through your reading list and your thought process from those times. And if you could include books, but also possibly bloggers that you enjoy and maybe podcasts.
Yeah, let me grab my phone and actually like look at a book list or something that would be useful. Yeah, I mean, so I started, we'll do a little background and this is perhaps helpful. I got into crypto in 2014 when I was like trying to play poker in New York and there weren't like sites that I could play, on for dollars or whatever that weren't like going to scam me, that I thought. And so I think like, I don't know, Yellow Sub or Cole or somebody mentioned Seals with Clubs. And I was like, oh, cool. I'll, put some Bitcoin on there and, or I'll get this Bitcoin thing and try to play some poker. So I did that for a little bit and then kind of like fell into crypto because of that. And then when I finished school, I was like, I wasn't really sure at all what I wanted to do. This was like summer 2015. And so I actually like looked into getting a job. I did some like interviews and consulting. And then like I hadn't been trading, but I sort of like was aware of certain things happening in the crypto space. And then I kind of saw that there was like a pretty active lending market on Poloniex, where you could just like, if you had Bitcoin, you could lend them to traders who are trying to like short sell it or whatever, or just use it for whatever other leverage stuff they were doing. And they pay you like a pretty significant borrow to do it. And this was like in the 30 to 50% range. And I thought that was just insane. I didn't have like some big long-term view or anything on crypto or anything at that point, but I was just like, well, the coins that I do have, I might as well just like put them in this cool savings account thing where people like give me more money. And so that sort of started my like exposure to the space. And then I kind of got into lending stuff a little bit more rigorously. And then I got into some like very simple arbitrage stuff. Like I said, kind of like around when like Bitcoin was forking and you had like Bitcoin Cash coming out, like Bitcoin Gold and all these other things. The lending and arbitrage was very good. Like you could, like there was one point on like Bitfinex where I think you could buy Bitcoin Gold for like 0.03 and you could sell it for like 0.05 on Poloniex, which is just like a disgustingly huge arb. And so just like things like that, I sort of basically started trading, doing things like that. And so I set up like a formal fund structure and started hiring people and stuff in 2018. And so my tweet at the beginning of this year was sort of with that in mind. So like I trade for a living. This is what I've done full time. This is the reason I haven't played poker for the last 3.5 years. Just yeah, whatever. I run a little shop, have a team of 8 people, trade all sorts of different strategies, whatever. don't have any formal experience in this, obviously. Don't have a background in finance, don't have real background in economics or anything. I've always sort of just been like a hobbyist and curious. And so like beginning of this year, it became clear to me that the levers, I was like missing like the primary levers of like the market movements. And I didn't really understand anything about the macroeconomy. I didn't understand how bonds worked, I didn't understand how rates worked, and I just had a lot that I needed to kind of figure out. Because like the markets that I traded seemed to be increasing in correlation to the traditional equity markets, and that was something that I had a big gap in. So yeah, anyway, started reading a lot more about like TradFi stuff and trying to like brush up on my economic history understanding, and just trying to like basically like figure out all the stuff that I don't know and still don't about the world. But I think like I figured out that rates were really important, that when we have like negative yielding debt in the world, things start to break and asset valuations get a little crazy, and maybe we get crypto bubbles and things like that. When that starts to reverse, well, maybe I should think about being careful. And that was January, I guess. I think he asked another question there, but I forgot.
Oh yeah. So were there particular books that you found influential, or maybe podcasts, bloggers?
I mean, as far as like podcasts and stuff, I think I really needed just like a basic education for how things worked. And so Real Vision was actually pretty helpful. Like I would just listen to the daily briefing every day to get kind of like market news and learn sort of like what other traders and people were just like thinking, or like what they're thinking about, or what they think are like the most important things happening. Because I didn't even really have like a great frame of reference for thinking about that stuff. Like the way that I've always approached trading has been like specifically crypto mostly, and just like trading derivatives and just like imbalances and shit. When people start losing their mind on derivatives, that tends to be like useful information for figuring out what's going to happen directionally, or just like it creates all sorts of other conditions that are pretty good for trading. All right, going through my book list. Dalio, read a couple books from him. I read like basically all the market wizards. So I got like, I actually think those are great books. I'd like to highly recommend the Market Wizards for people that don't have like much of a background or understanding of like TradFi, who's kind of curious about like how funds work and how those traders think about stuff and whatever. Like it was a pretty cool exposure to a lot of like the big guys in space today, learning a little bit about how they think about the world or whatever. Let's see, I read a bunch of like Peter Zeihan on geopolitics, kind of like understanding how, just like where we are in the world affects how like things are happening with like rates and dollars and
He's
oil
pretty
and gas
negative.
and food, and just like, yeah, he is pretty negative. He is pretty pessimistic. He's incredibly bullish on the USA though, just like relative positioning wise, and just like our strengths with rivers, and just like, we're pretty isolated. We don't have to worry about any of the Europe and Russia stuff, and like we're pretty self-sustaining for energy and food and these things. Anyway, he is very bullish or very bearish on Europe. I don't think he thinks anything's going to go well for them in the next couple of years. I don't know, stuff like this. Like I'm still an idiot, still just trying to plug in the holes, stuff that doesn't make sense to me. Try to dig a little bit, or find somebody smart I can talk to about it or whatever.
Well, you dropped one piece of information which is very notable. You have a team of 8 people. How did this come about? This is like a medium-sized fund.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm trying to like build a family office. I think like long term, I expect that I'll want to be mostly in control of my money and not just like give it to some person to deal with. And so it made sense to me over the last few years to kind of start moving in this direction, where I build a team of portfolio managers kind of running different strategies under me that I can kind of like oversee a little bit from the top and do more like big picture research and thinking and whatever, while the guys are kind of out there in the streets trading and executing the strategies and whatever. How did it start? All right. 2018, Bitcoin's just coming off an insane run up. 2017 was a stupid year. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I had a decent amount of Bitcoin and it went up a lot. And so that went really well for me. Became pretty clear that I needed help to manage what I'd spun it up to. So I hired a guy who was doing some consulting in New York, had a data analytics background, was like curious about crypto, but wasn't like, fully in yet. And so he was my first hire. This was beginning of 2018. And just had him kind of like doing some basic data research type stuff, putting together spreadsheets and building out some better tracking systems for the stuff that I was doing. Ended up torching off most of my money in 2018 during a bear market. That's actually part of why I got back into playing poker that year. I started trying to directionally trade with like kind of an up only bias at like the beginning of like a really bad bear market. And I was grossly ignorant to an enormous number of things. Anyway, so like had a really, really horrible year. Started playing poker again. Continued to trade a little bit on the side. Continued to think about why I was like making such horrific mistakes, thinking that I was a genius, trading Bitcoin without like any real reason to actually think that, other than I've been like modestly successful in a couple other things. So anyway, after all that, did some poker stuff, started taking trading a little bit more seriously, hired another guy, out of college to sort of help me build out just some better systems and kind of like develop my own strategies a little bit better. Let's see, how did this go? Trying to back up in time a little bit. Yeah, okay. So this was like late 2018, early 2019. I think I put some coins on BitMEX and was like, if I lose these, I'm not a trader anymore. And so like I took it very, very seriously from that point. Basically like journaled every single trade I ever made, journaled every click, talked about why I did it, things that went well, talked about why, which inputs mattered, things that didn't go well, tried to look for like info that, if I like, what info could I have seen that would have like led me to make a different decision in this moment, constantly updating and iterating on that process. And then eventually kind of like figured out some things that worked, and then was pretty meticulous about just doing the things that worked. And then, things started going a little bit better. So like the hiring of people has been fairly organic. It's sort of just like when, like my last two were somewhat opportunistic. I don't know how much you keep up with the crypto stuff, but there was like this big Three Arrows Capital blow up that kind of like nuked all markets. And I don't know, they lost anywhere from 10 to 20 billion and dragged down credit markets and things like that. I actually hired a couple guys from them that got screwed over by Sue and Kyle. They're running like long short strategy. One's a developer, one's a trader. It's like things like that were just like a good opportunity where I find somebody that I think is quite good at what they do, and then I can plug them in. What I'm doing and what they're doing sort of aligns pretty nicely with the general sort of idea and direction of building out a family office and having a team running a bunch of different strategies and stuff. I don't know if I can get there, but I'd like to.
It's basically oriented to alpha generation over fairly short time horizons in crypto. That's the focus.
That's been a lot of the focus. Yeah. But I mean, like, there's no mandate, just my money. So it's sort of like whatever we think we can make money betting on, we'll bet on. Right? Like we've bet sports, we bet elections. I still stake people in poker. Like it's just, yeah, it's like a gambling fund, I guess, although probably like 98% of the volume, at least for the last few years, up till maybe like 4 months ago, was, yeah, crypto.
How was your experience in setting up the formal structure for the fund?
I mean, it was fine. I think like the things that I need to do if I'm not trying to like manage outside capital is very simple. And I just, hired lawyers to do all that. Like I don't know anything about how this stuff works.
And you very much enjoy markets and trading, I take it.
I do, yeah. I think I've always, I would say, been a hobbyist. Like I've had an E-Trade account since like 2005, but like I wasn't like day trading. I'd kind of like click stuff that sounded interesting to me. Wasn't like super rigorous about it. I'd like read some basic investing books and read all the Warren Buffett letters and things like that. Over the years. Yeah.
Do you have an outlook going forward? Are you of a bullish or bearish bent?
I don't know. I mean, I change my mind so frequently. Like I mostly do shorter term stuff. Like as far as positioning I have right in this moment, I am long vol for the week, specifically on Bitcoin and Ethereum. I think it's a little bit too cheap with some things that are happening this week. Like BCI and I don't know, ECB guy just said some scary shit about like people should rebalance their pensions. And I don't know. I think vol's just priced a little bit too cheap for crypto right now. If I can get like a $800 straddle for 19K, I'm pretty happy to have that for like 4 days or whatever.
Did you ever get involved in NFTs or anything like that?
In what? NFTs? Yeah. A little bit. Like I traded punks a fair bit. Actually went pretty well. Did a fair bit of like mint and flips for all sorts of dusty projects. I don't think I have any like long-term bull biases for anything really in the NFT space, but it was certainly like an interesting, highly profitable place to be if you had half a brain and were paying attention.
So do you find yourself doing limited trades in the traditional markets like S&P, single stocks, all of that kind of stuff?
Limited, very limited things. That being said, like my overall positioning right now, like I just had not right in this moment, but lately I've had bigger bets in traditional equity markets than in crypto. But it's sort of more just like I sort of like position my like bear bets through equity options lately. Very short term stuff though. Like I don't usually hold stuff longer than a couple of weeks.
Right. Now we are going to take your retweets as endorsements. So I'm wondering if you could give us maybe
dangerous
3 to 5 of your favorite Twitter accounts to follow. There's a fair number of retweets for Tim Urban. So I'm taking that as an endorsement of Tim Urban. And
well, you'll probably be able to tell me better than I can who I like based on my actions. I love Tim Urban. This other guy for fun follows, Nathan Pyle, I think is fantastic. He does a book series called Strange Planet that I absolutely love. He does like comics and books and writing and whatever. Also lately I've been really enjoying tweets. I'm not sure what it's called, like something fascinating, but it's just like interesting science shit, cool technology things, whatever. But I mean, I follow like a ton of accounts for just like crypto stuff, like crypto Twitter's kind of a thing. So I follow a couple hundred people in that space. I'm trying to like increase my exposure to a few other things. I don't know. I'm struggling to think of like who my favorites are in this moment.
So on another note, you mentioned recently that you've taken up tennis and you're playing quite a lot.
I have.
Yeah. Other interviews, you say that you've been lifelong driven by improvement, generally speaking. That's what motivates you, improvement in all of the different domains. And I remember from your blog, there was quite an emphasis on fitness and nutrition. You were one of the early poker players in deep fitness. So take us through your current kind of fitness regimes and how tennis came in.
Yeah, I don't know about deep fitness. Probably save that for guys like Jason Kuhn or whatever. I would say I'm also more of a fitness hobbyist. But let's see. I've always been pretty active. Played a ton of sports growing up: football, basketball, baseball. Never picked up a tennis racket. Just didn't even. It was during baseball season, so it wasn't really like even a consideration for me. Baseball was my favorite sport at the time, growing up or whatever. And then like after high school, played a lot of like flag football and pickup basketball, and got into jiu-jitsu. Did that for a while. I did boxing. I did that for a while. And then during COVID, Natalie and I were spending a little bit of time, my wife, we're spending a little bit of time in Southern California. She'd been really wanting to take some tennis lessons. And so she booked us 5 tennis lessons with just like, whatever random coach. And I was just like, oh, fine, I guess I'll go with you. Like, we'll see how it goes. Loved it immediately. Like, it was just very clear to me the first time that I played that I was like, oh, I'm gonna love this. And so just kind of immediately started playing like 4 days a week, and have been doing that for the last, I guess a little over 3 years now. I'm absolutely gutted that I didn't start playing when I was a kid, because I fucking love it, and I like really am curious to see if like I could have gotten good or something. Anyway,
all right, I'm going to name some poker players, and you let me know if you think you can beat them in tennis. Dan Smith.
Yes.
Haral Bob.
Yes. Haral Bob and I played a lot, actually.
Me.
Not sure. Probably not.
So Patrick, no, obviously.
Definitely no Patrick. I watched like 3 minutes of you guys playing, I don't know, a couple years ago or whenever you guys played. And yeah, I'm gonna have to watch you again to see how I think. But I would imagine
just play sometime. Like, we're in Miami, we'll just play.
I'd love to.
I'm at a terrible point in the age curve, like really terrible.
So my thought is basically like I'll continue like this on the trajectory, and you're maybe like starting to go down a little bit. I don't know. There's probably some hope from that. But.
Yeah, the 40s.
How old are you again?
That they were tough, and I'm fit. I mean, last year I did a 1930 3 mile. So like I'm 1933. So like my fitness is as good as it's ever been, but I'm just like falling apart in small ways. Like I had elbow surgery this year. That was 7 months off, and just ankle gives me trouble. And I don't know. There's been a lot of wear and tear though. I've played a lot and done a lot of fitness stuff for a long time. So it's just, it's tough. It's tough. It's definitely like I'm getting worse.
So the first like 6 months I played, I used to play with this like 88-year-old dude, and he beat me the first like couple times we played. And I feel like I'm a good athlete. I move really well. Obviously, was terrible at tennis. But yeah, I just thought that was the coolest thing, that like an old dude with like a little bit of technique could just beat me up, like a healthy, fit, mid-30s guy or whatever. So at least I have like some hopes that I'll be able to do this for a long time, but I don't know, maybe with what you're saying.
You can do it for a long time, and you can be pretty good for a long time, but you definitely plateau and then start to get
fair enough.
Like a little worse. If you can somehow maintain fast feet, that can prevent the aging process. It's tough. My son now is 8, and there's a footwork coach around Miami that coaches Leila Fernandez and Fognini, and he does some hour-long lessons. So I'm going to try to give Bear the foundation of great footwork and try to sneak in some pointers myself and do some work there. But that's really what goes, is just like movement and quickness and reaction.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm like I've played in a couple leagues. I'm like a very good 4-0 or like a pretty bad 4-5.
We'll have fun battling. So you beat up on Haral Bob?
I beat up on Harald Bob a little bit. Yeah. He used to beat up on me, and now I'd say I beat up on him usually.
I ran into Mycon recently and I played him.
How's his game?
He's pretty good. He's crafty.
Cool. Yeah, I'm finding that like just a bunch of people play casual tennis or whatever. I played with Blake Stevenson the other day, Empire Maker 2.
How was your scoreline with Blake?
He beat me.
Okay. Then I'm beating you.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was like the worst I'd played in fucking like a year. But yeah, I mean, you're almost certainly beating me.
Yeah, my Empire score lines are in the sort of 2-1 range.
Yeah.
Consistently. And we've had some fun bets over the years.
Awesome.
It's fun to play with Empire because we both have a bad mental game. Like he'll tell you that our golf and tennis has been legendary because like we just not good pressure players. It's very funny because I don't know. In other domains, it's fine. Like for me, I never feel anxious playing poker or taking a test or anything like that. But closing out, say, a set at an important juncture is quite difficult. So our mental games are both poor, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, there's something about tennis too. I don't know. It's like I feel like I'm similar in that regard, right? Like I feel like I'm usually like reasonably cool under pressure or whatever, but like something about having to throw that stupid ball up in the air and like just yeah.
Well, I think when you start late, it's worse. Because
I'll just go with that.
Yeah. Because in our group, Steve Bass, he played Notre Dame, he was top 5 in the nation. When he plays tennis, he's lockdown. Just so good under pressure. Literally, he'll play a match with 0 misses. And then golf, which he started a little later, he'll occasionally throw in a choke. It's just, you have so much confidence if you've been playing since you were 5 years old and have handled high pressure situations in high school and college and after. Yeah, and golf is one where literally everyone chokes. Doyle Brunson has a famous quote where he says that in his lifetime of gambling golf that includes encountering thousands of people in high stakes matches, he knows of 7 people that didn't choke under pressure.
Pretty strong. I don't play golf.
Yeah.
I would imagine I would choke.
That's just because there's so much fine muscle control. It's like very, very hard to tackle short game and so forth under pressure. Well, man, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on. I know you don't do this kind of thing often. And from a podcasting perspective, I can tell you that nothing generates engagement like the sort of hidden wonder that never ventures in the public sphere. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Happy to be here. This is fun. Enjoyed talking to you.